Welcome back, everybody. This is David Gordon, and I am on with my friend and colleague, Dr. Paul Murano. Dr. Murano has his D.Min in marital ethics. He's got an M.A. in philosophy, M.A. in theology, and he's also got a certificate from the National Catholic Bioethics Center in healthcare ethics. That is a lot of degrees, so you have me beat in the degrees category. Good to see you.
Well, actually, I'm usually around 98.6 when it comes to degrees, so I think we're about the same.
Oh, sure. Actually, I had a fever this week because I've had a flu.
That's right. I
got you beat in that category.
You do. You have me beat when it comes to degrees.
I'm actually sweating right now because the body temperature fluctuates around, and I don't know. It's been a weird week. So if my voice cracks, it's because I've had a flu and I've been coughing just constantly. Okay. Well, today, Paul, Dr. Murano, is on with us to discuss kind of the phraseology of the left. The left wins because it controls language. And if anyone has read 1984, George Orwell, it's really important for the left to control language simply because they're wrong in their worldview. Their worldview is wrong. And in order to get a wrong worldview impressed on the consciousness of Americans, Westerners, they need to control the language to control how you think. If you control the rules of how something operates, you're really controlling how something operates. So the left has made it a point to control the language, especially in 4 terms that Paul and I were going back and forth about. I mean, all over the place, but we're going to talk about 4 terms today. Number 1, LGBT. Number 2, the whole term community. I'm always hearing about communities now. Number 3, the word gay, and number 4, the word gender. Paul, I hand it off to you.
I tell you, there's really 2 basic ways of using language. Language and religion are the 2 general things that separate us from all the other animals, because we are able to rise above our physiological constitution to something that is abstract and spiritual, if you will. So when it comes to this very human thing that we call language, there are really 2 basic ways to use it. Number 1 is to use it in a way that symbolically corresponds to reality. And by and large, of course, that's what Christians do. That's what most conservatives do. They want to properly call things as they are objectively. The other way to use language, which you were referring to with regard to 1984 and so forth, is not to have your language correspond to reality, but have reality correspond to your agenda and create language to that. And so we were talking about language constructs here, that we create our own reality by creating our own language that doesn't necessarily correspond to anything in reality, but it's an attempt to create reality ourselves. So at the heart of this whole leftist movement is the desire and attempt to create reality, i.e. be our own gods. And that's
very satanical. Yeah, it's very satanical.
Oh, of course.
I will not serve. I'm going to be existentialist and create a reality around me that's not objective, but it's kind of like a reality that conforms to my own prejudices, the desires of my own fallen flesh.
Speaking of fallen flesh, it goes right back to Genesis chapter 3. What was the main seduction of the serpent? You will be like gods. In other words, you don't have to follow that God, the real God. You can create your own reality and your own morality. And this is the basic way the left is doing it today, by conquering the language to create these constructs, which everybody, unfortunately, just follows like sheep. And we need to reverse that. And the terms that you're talking about, we're going to talk about on your show tonight, and that is gender,
LGBT.
Yeah, gender, LGBT community, and the term gay. Which one would you like to start with?
I think gender is the biggest one that we should start with, because it's obviously just been in the headlines recently. We have Leah Thomas, the
Yeah.
infamous quote female swimmer,
Yeah.
who's just destroying it right now, dominating the real women in the sport. And we have, as you know, all around the country, liberals are trying to corrupt the minds of small children, to scandalize small children, teaching them that, boys can be girls, girls can be
Yeah.
boys, it's whatever you feel, it depends if it's a Tuesday, all that nonsense. So we should start with gender. And
Yeah.
before that though, let me just say, for like a broad umbrella concept here, I get so frustrated when I hear typical cucked, wimpy, kind of mainstream, conventional conservatives be like, well, why does it even matter? Why does it even matter? Why should we fight about these words? They're settled. I don't like it, but let's just move on past it. Like, everyone
Get to
says
that.
gender now, so like it's not that big of a deal. We should just kind of move past it and fight
Well,
the next fight down the road. And I've seen this firsthand. Like in law school, all the textbooks. First of all, the correct way to speak English is when you're speaking of like kind of a third person, unknown person. You use the word he because he means he or she. But we have this
yeah.
ridiculous
That's
convention in
standard
English now.
English.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the proper English. That's the King's English. When you're speaking of an unknown person, it's a he. That is the closest thing we have to kind of like a neuter in English. And that's just how the language is spoken. You can even look at the editor of the New York Times wrote a book called The Careful Writer, and it came out in the 70s, and he's like, well, for writers of craftsmanship and taste, the only thing you're going to say is he. But we started losing that battle. I see he or she all the time now, or the S, backslash he,
Yeah.
or God forbid, even just she, like to stand in for he, to show how woke we are. And that happened all the time in law books. So I was in law school, I was
Yeah.
going through it, and it's constant with she. And I turned to a peer, and I was like, what is this she stuff? Because it was distracting every time I saw it, because it's like, it seems like ungrammatical. And the guy next to me was like, yeah, I don't like it either, but we just got to deal with it, right? And I was like, haha, no. Like,
No.
we should
I,
fight
I
against it. That's
I
wrong.
agree. I agree with you because what we're talking about is the foundation of the whole the house of cards that the left has built. It's not just something that you can sort of bypass and hope that we can win the battle, because we can't without the language. And secondly, what you're basically saying is standard English has been around for centuries. For the past 25 years, it has been challenged with something called inclusive English. And we see this with pronouns, and we also see it in religion. And how do you address God? And we're even seeing it in liturgy. So yeah, that's a whole big thing too about what to do with that. Um, let's look at gender pretty closely.
Let's do it, Paul.
The word gender, it really relates to masculine and feminine, and it particularly through history has related to nouns of various languages. English is actually kind of a something that is not part of the ordinary, because English doesn't have gendered nouns in gendered language, but many, or if not most, other languages do. And you have masculine nouns and feminine nouns, and that's basically what gender has meant for a long time. Now you can loosely use masculine and feminine traits or characteristics on various things too. And that's basically what these nouns are. So like a table was, I believe in most languages, it uses the feminine noun. Tables are receptive. They hold things. They support things. Very often they nurture people by virtue of supporting food, etc. So there's this understanding of masculine and feminine, but it has nothing to do with sex. There's nothing to do with biological sex per se. Because a male, you might say, a particular male may have this or that feminine trait, and this particular female may be a tomboy at some part of her life. She may have a masculine characteristic here or there, but it does not change one's sex, and it certainly does not. It is not worthy of calling them he or she if they are a female, and vice versa. So here's the bottom line. The left wants to conflate because they love ambiguity. Ambiguity serves their ambitions to change the agenda. They want to conflate biological sex with characteristics, traits, masculine, feminine. This is dangerous, and it's working because now they've separated sex from gender. See, for centuries, the question has been, what sex are you, not what gender are you. Sex is male and female. Gender relates to characteristics. It has nothing to do with biological sex. So you have to call a biological man he and a biological female she, no matter how much of a tomboy she might be, no matter how feminine he might be. They don't change their sex, and the pronoun only goes with the sex. Very important.
Yeah, that's right. You know, the way to describe it, the way a lot of people describe it, is that words have gender and people have sex. Now, it sounds funny, and it's a good way to remember it. It's a good mnemonic. But sex is biological, and gender is linguistic. That is the basic distinction. Yeah. And you saw in the 60s and the 70s, feminists started saying gender for sex. It wasn't some organic development. It was very much foisted upon us from the ideological left in the ivory towers, the universities. You know, these PhD feminists said they were going to start using the word gender because gender really calls to mind a social construct because you know, language is created as a tool for man. So it's by using gender, something that's a social construct, and applying that to sex, what they're really saying is sex and sex roles and biology and, quote, biological determinism and anthropology, theological anthropology, all of these things can change with the mind of the culture. That's the devil that's at play right here. That's what it.
And David, it seems to be based upon this false notion of ontological or anthropological dualism, that biology doesn't matter, and that what really your true identity is what you say it is, not what you are. And it kind of, you know, this spills over into the abortion question. A preborn child is a human being when the mother says it is, not when it is a biological reality. So it's a false notion that biology doesn't mean anything because we are, as you know, we are body-soul composites. We are not minds that determine our identity regardless of our bodies. Our bodies aren't our shells. They're not like clothing that you put on and at death you take it off. This is what we are. We're body-soul composites. We're hylomorphic unions, as Aquinas would say. That's an extremely important starting point that I think most of Western society has lost.
That's right. No, we are not ghosts in machines, as they say.
As Descartes would say,
Right, exactly. And, you know, the soul is the form of the body. We reject the dualism that the body can be one way and the soul can be another. So that's un-Catholic.
That's the point,
So, but they are laying the foundation, number one, for feminism, and as the feted offspring of feminism, you know, transgenderism, because that's really what it comes to. When you start rejecting biological roles and this basic category, you could call it a genus type thing, male versus female. When you start rejecting that, and that there are ideas and mores that flow from that, when you reject the idea of true masculinity and true femininity as attached to manness, maleness, and femaleness, then you've created a big problem, and you've basically created the capacity for something like transgenderism to exist. So it's really important that we fight the language fight. People don't understand this. They're so willing to yield this because they can't connect the dots in their brain that, like, oh, the language fight is really grooming America. It's really grooming the West for a deeper moral fight. They can't connect those dots, so they start to resent people that can. And they start thinking, oh, these guys are just being persnickety. We got Paul Murano, we got David Gordon, and they're going on for like 40 minutes about words. Guys, get over it. It's words. Well, hey, guys, it's really important, which is why every Tim Pop dictatorship in the entire world's history has had some kind of ministry of propaganda. Because when you use words, you control people's minds. When you manipulate words, you're manipulating people's minds. And that's what the left, who is smarter than us, by the way, understands that every Tom, Dick, and Harry out there does not understand. So instead of bristling when we're like, hey, red alert, 911, SOS, these language is being manipulated so that the left can put an
Yeah.
agenda. They can run it down your throat. They can, put their foot on your neck and drive their agenda home. Don't bristle. Just be like, oh, okay, we better fight the language fight. But people don't have that kind of foresight, Paul.
Words represent ideas, and societies are built upon ideas. So words are everything. I mean, you got to start with words until you have that right. Nothing else will be right. So I agree with you. It is literally impossible to be one sex and the opposite gender. It's impossible because gender.
People,
Yeah,
sorry.
I was just going to say gender springs from the sex that you are. Go ahead.
That's right. Do people think that it would really be possible for Leah Thomas to be soaking his buns in a pool with a bunch of, girls that he's competing against? Do people think that would be possible if we hadn't divorced sex and gender? Don't people understand this? Do people understand that it wouldn't be possible for in New York State them to be grooming like second graders, or in New Jersey for them to be teaching second graders about gender ideology and transgenderism if we hadn't given up the fight about gender versus sex in the 70s when all this nonsense started? Did people not connect those dots? Do you understand that if you don't bristle every time you hear he or she, his or hers, or just, God forbid, she as the third person default pronoun, if you don't bristle when you hear gender used for sex, what's the baby's gender? It's a gender reveal party, yay. You're part of the problem. You're part of the reason we have Leah Thomas right now.
The question is, what is the baby's sex?
Right.
The baby, not what is the baby's gender. That is, yeah. And it's interesting how these people now insist that the term man and woman has to match the created, constructed gender, not the actual sex of the person. I mean, some of them will admit, okay, he's a biological man, but we need to call him a woman. Well, then, why would you use the term woman for what he is expressing rather than what he actually is? And there is no logic to this. It's an illogical power grab, basically, is really at the heart of it.
Well, in some kind of a strange way, Paul, since we're in bizarro world now, it makes sense. Because as we were alluding to earlier, talking about Genesis, talking about creation, talking about man becoming a god unto himself.
Right, exactly.
That's really moral relativism. That's subjectivism.
Yeah.
And with subjectivism, with moral relativism, there is no sin except for one. What you're really saying, if you're a moral relativist, is there is no sin except to say that there is an objective sin. So in a relativistic society, which we are by now, I mean, we've totally lost our moral compass in the West. In a relativistic society, the cardinal sin is to tell some sex-confused man or gender-confused man, I'm not even sure what the appropriate one would be because that's how weird things have gotten, is to tell that man that he is not, in fact, a woman. That's like the cardinal sin, because if you become a god unto yourself in relativism, then all of these people has essentially divinized themselves. And when you tell Bruce Jenner, like, hey, dog, your name's Bruce, not Caitlin, and you're a dude, then you are undermining his self-divinization. And that's not good in relativism.
It's divine authority. Exactly. It's blasphemy. In their religion, it's blasphemy, because in their religion, everybody's their own god. So you're absolutely right. You want to go to the next term?
Let's do it.
All right. This one has been around longer than the constructed gender to replace sex, and that is the term gay. I have a huge problem with the term gay for three reasons, actually. Number one is it was stolen from the term that means happy and joyful. In English.
Now you're just being a buzzkill, Paul.
Secondly, it makes a noun or a label of a person, vis-a-vis you are your disordered desires. That's what you are. It's not that you feel same-sex attraction and that you are gay. So it becomes a noun and it becomes a label for a person, which, and usually for the psyche, that means, well, if I am X, I can never change to Y. So it's psychologically damaging in that respect.
That's right. I think we recognize that this is not a good thing in basically every other category that exists. Like
True.
if you saw somebody that had some handicap, and you're like, look at this cripple. People recoil at that because we automatically understand that that's disrespectful. You're taking somebody's disorder or privation, to put the philosophical term out there, their physiological privation. Yeah. And you're making their identity, which is exactly what's happening with gay. Or if people know it in the realm of race. If you went out and you're like, oh, look at this Asian, or look at this black. People are like, oh, that's not kosher. Because you're making something that's an accidental of being a person. Obviously all races are children of God.
Part of their essence,
all the baptized, all people who are baptized, regardless of race, are children of God. And all races are creatures of God. So it's disordered, and we recognize that. But when you do it for gay, for whatever reason, and I think we know what that is, society's like, well, we got to celebrate that. We got to celebrate just being put into this broad category where you are completely consumed by this characteristic.
It's bizarre, but it's true. It's bizarre, but it's true. And you know what else gets my goat about the term, other than what we just talked about, is that it attempts exactly what the term gender attempts, and that is to conflate two things into one. This one conflates feelings with actions or behavior. So when somebody is gay, what does that mean? When I used to teach ethics classes in college, I used to say, all right, everybody, picture this in your mind. You have two people. You have one person who has same-sex feelings. They had them all their lives, but they've never acted upon them. And then you have person B, who never had same-sex feelings, but for money, suppose he's in the pornography or the sex business, for money, he does same-sex acts on a regular basis with people. Which one of those two are gay? And it really confounded them, because a lot of them said, well, the one that's doing it but doesn't feeling it. But I think more than half of the class said, no, it's the one that feels it but doesn't do it. But this is exactly what the left wants to do. It wants to conflate two completely different ideas: having disordered feelings versus choosing to act upon these disordered feelings. I don't know. With the term gay, you don't know which one that is. And so can somebody be called gay without ever choosing to do a homosexual act?
No, I don't think so. It would be the same as having the inclination to murder or commit any other sin. One is not a murderer unless he has murdered. And still, each person that you see that maybe has committed one of these screaming sins, the peccata clementia, and has committed a murder, I'm not just walking around like, look at this murderer over here, Then
why is it that somebody who is saddled with same-sex attraction, who makes it known, I don't know why they would, but who makes that known, but doesn't act upon it, is considered quote-unquote gay? Who never acted upon it?
Well, ultimately the answer is identity politics by the left. It's like to break down the old order, they need to kind of unite a bunch of fractious groups against the bogeyman, which of course they have made into the white Christian male, the white Christian patriarch.
Right.
So that's the sleight of hand that's happening from the left. But like what the philosophical underpinnings are, or anything deeper, I defer to you on that, Paul.
Well, it's the way that the left always works with language. It conflates two ideas so that it can confuse people enough so that they would just go along with it. But they never ask. They never say, well, when you say this person is gay, do you mean that they have same-sex feelings, or do you mean that they are acting upon them in homosexual behavior? So I would say that we who believe that that language should correspond to truth and reality, we should say person with same-sex attraction, or if you want to go the extra mile, person who is saddled with disordered same-sex attraction, versus person who acts upon these disordered behaviors, these disordered desires, that is, and the biblical term for that is sodomite.
Sure.
So somebody with same-sex attraction versus sodomite, they're morally very two different kinds of beings.
Of course. No, absolutely.
And you should always make that distinction.
Absolutely. Somebody who's struggling with a temptation towards a sin or temptation towards a vice should not be lumped in with somebody who has, I guess, perfected, consummated the vice by actually engaging in it. Yeah. And more than that, it's like a perfect consummation of this vice, because not just engaging in it, but celebrating engaging in it. So we don't want to conflate the two. Otherwise, everybody who's in anger management should be called a murderer by that same logic. And it just doesn't make sense. But again, the left wants to normalize this behavior, and they want to make it... yeah, exactly. They want to make it. They don't see the sin. They don't see the sin, and they want to make it seem like it's connected to a biological determinism. Ironically, we used that term earlier in the context of feminism, because the left, with feminists, when it comes to sex versus gender, they reject biological determinism. They reject the notion that there are certain virtues that attach specifically to each of the sexes. But then, when it comes to, I was born, maybe, they want to find a biological link for homosexuality, which, by the way, there isn't one, because if you believe, as the left does, wholeheartedly, in, natural selection, then genes that would make somebody not pass on their genes by having offspring would have died out millions of years ago if they had come into being. So I don't believe there's a genetic basis for homosexuality, number one, but they want to find that genetic link so they can be like, bam, genetic link. So they're biologically predetermined to having these feelings, therefore it's fine. It's like, but you reject biological determinism. But it's fine, because leftists don't think, and neither do the rubes that believe in leftism, so they can have these flagrant contradictions without it being devastating to their ideology. I mean, of course, the people who think it's devastating.
If I'm not mistaken, we've gone through the map of the entire human genome recently, and there was no finding of any homosexual gene, if you will. And is it possible that in utero some kind of disorder occurs hormonally or chromosomally that creates a propensity to this? We don't know. It's possible. We know it's not genetic, but it's possible that something in utero, or the first 3 years of life, or some people say the first 5 years of life, if there was a trauma. Basically, it's still not fully understood, the genesis of same-sex attraction. But I would just say we need to use the language in the proper way to distinguish between people who may have those feelings, if they want it known or not, it's up to them, and people who do those actions as a behavioral lifestyle.
Sure. Okay, let's move on to community. And this is a favorite of mine. I love this.
Yeah,
everything
me too.
Now, when
I
hear people talking about just, kind of a group of people, it's never just like, there's a group of skateboarders outside of my house or whatever. It's the skateboarding community, Paul. It's never like, there's some bunch of Italians or whatever living over here. It's the Italian American community. And especially with the things that are favorite little projects of the left. It's never just a bunch of sodomites are out there in San Francisco, flopping their butt cheeks in the wind and having a parade that's lewd and lascivious. It's that, the representatives of this community are out there marching for pride and being just absolutely splendid human beings exercising their right to free speech. It's always that. Or, the African American community, as if all of the black folks in America are just one big community with all this solidarity. But you never hear the European American community. It's
I was about to say that. You don't. Nothing conservative is a community.
It's not. I'm a member of the gun community, or I'm a member of the pro-life community. It's no, I just believe that babies shouldn't be murdered, and I own a gun.
Yeah, totally agree. So the term community is added on to give it a little, I don't know, respect, if you will. If you're a part of a community, then you are. It gives the term, I think, a little more respect, and that's why they do it. A little more
Legitimacy.
regularity,
Yeah.
legitimacy. Good word. But I think the truth is, if you sort of delve beneath the surface a little bit, each one of those letters of the alphabet soup mafia doesn't necessarily like each other. In fact, there's a lot of problems between the L's and the G's and the T's. And I don't even know who the B's are, but they sort of just go whatever side that they feel like on a particular day.
It's the
But
forgotten vice, the forgotten disorder. Those
and then there's the
bisexuals are really they're gonna come out marching with a
by, by,
pitchfork.
by the way, I'm not exactly sure what Q the queer for Q actually is. That different than L or G?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah,
All right.
I never really thought about it. I mean, the reason they put in the Q and they admit to this is because you take a word that's a pejorative, and if
Yeah.
you
No, I
embrace
know
it
that.
and you adopt it,
Yeah.
then it like
Yeah, it legitimizes. Yeah,
stigmatizes it.
no
Yeah, so
question, no
that's why they
question
did
about
it.
that, and that's why they did with gay too. But but why? What is it doing? You would think that it would have to be different than the other three for it to make the grade of the alphabet soup. But it seems
Sure,
like
that's
it's the
right.
same. It's the same as L and G. But
But
anyway,
so now can we
what
just
do
be
I
like,
know?
look at this bunch of queers over here, and that's cool because they've labeled themselves that. So it'd just be like me saying it about anybody else, right?
Right,
I don't
right.
know. That's an aside, Paul.
All right. Well, let's look at the term community. Community, the word com means with unity. So people with unity that have unity together. That's pretty much a falsehood. These people don't have unity together because ultimately, and you know this as well as I do, unity is only possible amongst people if they share truth. Without truth, there cannot be unity. So literally, these LGBT folks do not have a community. They're a
That's
bunch of
right.
people, but they're not a community.
That's right. And it's making their union. And I mean, you said it best. Union has to be around truth, and ultimately, you find that perfected in the mystical body of Christ, with like
Yeah.
the sacrament of communion as your visible
Yeah.
source and summit.
And the word
And
com was union
right,
with Christ.
right,
Exactly.
exactly. So,
Who
but
by the
it's
way,
it's
is truth. So you can't have any greater union than that communion with Christ himself, who is truth.
100%.
Yeah.
But they've taken these smaller, this piffle, these trivial qualities, and they've tried to make that the source of unity at the expense of the true sources of unity. So you
Right.
can be like, oh, well, we're an African American community. It's like, but some of you guys are Muslim, others are Catholic, others are Protestant. What's the fundamental source of unity here? What's the basis of unity? So
Exactly.
instead, you're just picking something that's like accidental to the human condition. Again, like the pigmentation in your skin, and you're trying to make that the source of some solidarity or fellow feeling, which is
Right.
asinine. It's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, if you have somebody that's like a practicing ardent Muslim, and
Yeah.
you have somebody of the same race that's a practicing ardent Catholic, you're not a community. There should be tension between you because the
Oh yeah.
Muslim wants to eradicate your existence from the face of the earth, and you, as a Christian,
Yeah.
want to save this person by evangelizing them, save
Yeah.
their soul, help
Look,
him to believe the correct thing.
as a Catholic, I feel much more union with fellow Catholics than I do with, say, fellow Italian Americans. Um, but I think what you're saying is that first they're making race and disordered sexual desire an identity in itself, and then they're saying, since that's our identity, we will base our unity upon that. It's all based on straw. It's all based on straw, and it's using language falsely to create constructs that don't exist. And that's really what we're talking about here.
That's why the left builds coalitions, and this is what I wrote
Yeah.
in Rules for Retrogrades. The real Christian fellowship excludes coalitions. Coalitions are short-lived and they also use people as a means to an end. And there's always going to be this natural tension, which will make them, it's like the dark side of the Force in Star Wars. It's a quick means to power, but it's not more powerful than the light side of the Force, although it takes more time to do things properly and develop your prowess in the light side of the Force. So there's an analogy there, and I don't think that's what George Lucas had in mind by any stretch of the imagination, but there's definitely something to that. That's why on the right, we want to form authentic fellowships where we believe all of the same things with each other before we decide to march with somebody else. This is why feminists should be expelled from the pro-life movement. That's why they have no place among us. Because by inviting them in, we inevitably weaken our own cause, and we're going to have dissension down the line. It's why we don't want to form, we don't want to invite, quote, gay conservatives into the conservative movement, because ultimately they're a liability and they will destroy the movement. What we need is ideological purity, and that's the only way you can form a long-lasting movement. But the left succeeds because they don't need anything long-lasting. They just need to form coalitions short enough to undermine the fabric of Christian society, and then, we ultimately see that, like even with Marxists, at first they favor homosexuality because it destroys the moral order. Then they end up persecuting homosexuals. So they ultimately turn on each other and eat each other like a pack of wild dogs.
Well, there's no true unity when there isn't truth. And so, right now, for example, on the world stage, you have Russia and China forming a coalition because they want to challenge the United States for world dominance. But they hate each other. What's his name? Putin wants to be a new czar to create a new Holy Roman Empire that he's the head of, and the other guy is totally he wants to continue his atheistic communism of China. They have nothing in common with each other, but they have a common enemy, which is the United States. And so I think this is what you're saying here, by and large, with the left. These coalitions have a common enemy, which, bottom line is, it's Christ. And it's really it's to extract Christianity from society. And what does Christianity come from? Christ. And so their religion of deification of individuals, of every individual, is cannot coexist with Christianity. And that's really the bottom line here. This is where the battle is. And if I can just add this one thing. If you believe in the apparitions of Fatima, you know that Lucia said that I think the Blessed Mother said that the final battle, not one of the battles, but the final battle will be for marriage and the family.
Yep.
And this is exactly what we're talking about. All this linguistical undermining of reality when it comes to sex, gender, proper the natural law and the natural order of marriage, sex, and family are part of this final battle between the cosmic forces of God, who's the creator of the universe, and Satan, one of his creatures who thinks he is his own God and can do his own thing.
That's right. No, absolutely. People are always like, well, Dave, why do you write so much about women? Why do you write so much about feminism? You just hate women? No, it's absolutely because of Fatima. Because we know that the final battle between the Lord and the devil will be over the family. And it stands to reason, too. Because if the devil can corrupt the family, what's he ultimately doing? If you destroy mothers and fathers, if you destroy the family, which is the first and vital cell of society, which is the training grounds for future generations in decency, virtue, grace, all of these things that lead to well-formed individuals that are going to have a chance for heaven later on, if you destroy that, what you've done is win a bunch of souls for the devil himself. You've won a bunch of souls for perdition. And that's what the devil ultimately wants. He hates God. And what better way to thumb your nose at God, what better way to revile God than taking his children and winning them for perdition, winning their souls to destruction and torture and damnation for eternity. There is no better way. It's the ultimate act of hatred by the devil for God. So we need to fight this battle, and that's why it seems like we're bogged down in what to a lot of people seems like minutia. because we understand that the battle starts small. It starts in subtle ways. You know, the devil didn't go to Eve and say, "No, God hates you. He doesn't love you. He said you can't eat. You have to starve." He said, "Did God really say you couldn't eat of any of the fruit of any of the trees in the garden?" It's a subtle lie. Oh no, it's just this one.
Oh, yeah.
The fruit of this one tree. He mixes lies with truth, and that's harder for people to discern a lie when it's mixed in with the truth.
Candy-coated poison. That's what it is. And it seems that you're spot on when it comes to destroying the family, because two things occur here. Number one, the government is able to become more dictatorial, because the family is the unit that is the middleman, if you will, between the individual and the government. So you destroy this, and what do you got left? You've got the government being able to dictate things that it wouldn't previously been able to do. Secondly, you hit on it again when it comes to children, because this is what the government wants. If you can form the children away from the parents, we're seeing this every day. We're seeing this every day today in the 21st century, that the government is seeking to form children according to their propaganda. Man, this is really demonic, and this is how it's happening.
That's right. Well, Paul, thank you for your time tonight. I appreciate you being on with me.
My pleasure.
Guys, you can look at more from Paul on his website, and that's paulmurano.com. You can also listen to his podcast, which is Beneath the Surface with Paul Murano. Paul, I'll see you at work next week. But
That's good.
For the time being, I bid you good night, sir.
It was a pleasure. It's always fun talking to you, David.
Absolutely. God bless, Paul.
On camera or off. Take care.
Take care.